for 2 seconds so we can acknowledge our musicians as they're taking their leave from the stage. We have on hand Yumi Emma Pan on one of the violins, Michelle Liu on the next violin, and Yunshi Emily Pan on cello. Let's give it up again for our amazing talent here this morning's invocation. It's titled Morning by Reverend Clinton Lee Scott, and it can be found in our hymnal. Quote, "From the east comes the sun, bringing in a new, unspoiled day. It's already circled the earth and looked upon distant lands and faraway peoples. It has passed over mountain ranges and the waters of the 7 seas. It has shone upon laborers in the fields, into the windows of homes and shops and factories. It has beheld proud cities with gleaming towers, and also the hovels of the poor. It has been witness to both good and evil, with the works of honest people and the conspiracy of knaves. It has been seen marching armies, bomb-blasted villages, and the destruction that washeth the noonday. Now, unsullied from its tireless journey, it comes to us, messenger of the morning, harbinger of a new day."
So let's go ahead and sing. We picked this song because it has a lot of noodles that poor Lee has to play. So welcome to the Unitarian Church. My name is Nathan. I'm one of your ministers. I'm pleased to welcome you today. Funny story, well, many funny stories. There's this one musician in the hymnal who always puts in like 30 16th notes, and whenever we feel like Lee is not being limber enough, we pick one of those. Glad you're with us on this Ingathering Sunday. First really interesting thing, it's your first Ingathering as our Minister of Congregational Life. Julie, you can clap. No one else, just Julie. For those of you online, welcome. We're glad you are with us. My first ingathering, I went up to now Minister Emeritus Steve Crump and I said, "What do you think about robing?" And he said, "Sure." And I never mentioned it again to anybody. And then, Wednesday, you said, hey, what do you think? It's Ingathering, we should robe. So I don't know what's in the system, but there's something about the first Ingathering of the second minister where we robe. It's just I'm just fascinated by it. But so here's what's going on today. There is a lot of cool stuff. So in between services, for those of you online, you can come on down if you're living locally. We're going to have our Connections Fair. It's the first time we've ever done this. This is a way to find out what is going on in the church, either how to get more involved or just to find out what is going on. So you will see tables. All of you who walked in, and for those of you online, there's just a line of tables that people are going to be sitting at, giving you information. And there's also something we're doing this Sunday, which we have not done in 2.5 years, which is the coffee is back. We introduce robes, but the coffee. So here's what we are asking. The coffee is in the kitchen, but please, imbibe of your caffeine outside. Grab it and go is what we're trying to work on. Next Sunday, our social justice team is going to meet at a different time. It's going to be during middle hour. So just know that is coming up next week. And also next week, we brought in Reverend Chris Long to be our Minister of Congregational Life, but we've never asked him to explain to you what he thinks that is. So next Sunday is an exploration of what congregational life means in this current stage we are in. And I wanted to thank, Penny Nichols spearheaded the whole Connections Fair. With help from Dottie Kelly, Bonnie Brown, and Mijai, and I wrote it down, and Mike Aber. So thank you all for helping. It's good to be together. Welcome to this Ingathering Sunday.
Good morning again. This is Ingathering, and that's all we get on Ingathering. Good morning again to you all. I am Reverend Chris Long, and I use the pronouns he, him, his, and of course your Minister of Congregational Life. Anyone excited to be here this morning? Oh, I got a few hands. I don't know about y'all, but this Ingathering, I am fired up and ready to go. Fired up and ready to go. As we continue to embrace the excitement of the moment in the life of this congregation, let's take pause to offer a prayer for all that we may be holding in our hearts and in our minds that may need community support today and in the weeks to come. I would like to start by having us acknowledge what a gift it is and give thanks to the indigenous communities on whose lands which we occupy. You are a blessing. You are a blessing. When you sneeze, you are a blessing. As well, I'd like to welcome the ancestors, all of our ancestors, to be present with us here and now. Our morning prayer. Spirit of life, Gaia, universe, God. As we gather in this sacred place today, we know that some here are carrying the realities of their own pain, physical pain in their bodies, upcoming surgeries, mental distress for any number of reasons, or spiritual pain needing more comfort now. Others are carrying the reality that someone we love may be living with life-threatening ailments, even in hospice, with all that this means. Some of us are living with the realities of the passing of loved ones, gone too soon. even in the last many months. May we all know that this congregation is a place to share the burdens of our lives. And as we do live in a both-and world with all of its complexities, wars, democracies at threat, our climate in distress, we must take time to embrace joy when and where it comes. Amen. Be with us as we begin to step into what this church year, the next chapter, may mean, never truly knowing what the future holds. We close this prayer in a spirit of gratitude for this morning and for those who gather near and far who make up this beloved community. Blessed be, Ashe, Shalom, Salam, and may it be so. Amen. Amen. Amen.
We don't have any cards to sign this week, but we do have two memorial service announcements. We had scheduled a memorial service for M.K. Politz earlier, and her brother was sick and not able to travel, and so we've rescheduled it. It'll be November 5th at 10 o'clock. Also, a friend of the congregation I don't even know how to put it. Well, earlier this week, Michelle Crump Harrington died, and her family reached out to this church and asked if we could host a memorial service. So that will be today. The gathering starts at 4, service will be around 4:30. This ritual we have is open to everybody, visitor and member alike. For those of you online, it's open to you as well. Type it into the chat. We invite those who wish to come forward, either along the east or the west wall. Take a stone, let it represent what's on your heart, what's on your mind, whatever you're carrying, and place it in the chalice bowl so that you can be in more peace, more together. We now invite those who wish to come forward as we place stones. And we say together, with hope to make this a better world, we light this flame. Its light is a symbol of the power of love. The chalice will be lit in this church. So welcome to Ingathering Sunday at this church. Believe it or not, this is the first Ingathering we have had in person in 3 years. Also, I don't want to call her out when she's sitting there, but I'm going to. Kathy and I were talking. We don't know if we did an Ingathering last year or not. Julie says we didn't, so I'm going to say we didn't. That's what our minds are like. But today is a reason to celebrate. So to give you the backstory, Unitarianism and Universalism mostly came out of white New England, and for some reason they decided to shut down during the summer, I guess all to go to the beach, which makes no sense to me because if I was in New England, the one time I would want to be together in an unair-conditioned building would be in the summer. We should be shutting down here, and they should be shutting down in the winter, but I'm not in charge of everything. But so traditionally, Ingathering is the time after we have shut down for the summer, which we haven't done in decades, where we get back together. Because school starts here essentially August 1st, July is kind of our church shopping month for a lot of visitors, and August we're sort of fully into programming. But for whatever reason, that is what Ingathering means here at the church. But today also marks the next phase in our church life. And because this is our first Ingathering with our new minister of congregational life, and because this is our first Ingathering in person in a few years, and because this is our first Ingathering with me as your senior minister in person, and for so many other reasons, I'm encouraging us to think of today as the start of the next chapter in the church life. The reason we're choosing next chapter and not new book or new story or not wiping the slate clean is because the next chapter requires everything that went before. It requires all of the storylines, all of the messaging, all of the plot twists, all of the characters, all of what builds up to where we are now in this moment. And with this next chapter, there are things and storylines that we have to let go of to start writing what is new for us. So what does your next chapter in your life look like? What do you envision for your family and your friends and your relationships? Who do you still need to be angry at? And who do you need to let that anger go? Today marks a turning point in this church. It marks the first programmatic year with us fully reopened, with the staff you chose with us on the trajectory that you've been asking for, at least in a long time. So here's what you're going to see today. You're going to hear some of the next chapters in this church life, about how some things may look different going forward. We'll have a blessing of backpacks and lunch boxes and briefcase and every other thing that you put your stuff in to go into the world. Because for every child who is starting a new grade, this is a new chapter in their life. For every adult who is starting a new job or a new life stage, this is a new chapter in your life. And we want to be here to bless you for it. So let's sing this next chapter in this church's life. I invite you to rise for this next hymn.
Shall we gather at the river, where bright angel feet have trod, with its crystal
So the thing that got me started thinking about this next chapter was actually trying to figure out where on earth we are with the pandemic. It's been really challenging for me to look at the stages of this dumb thing. As soon as I get my head wrapped around one, we're 2 stages ahead in the pandemic. So I thought we should talk about where we are in the next chapter of this church as it relates to the pandemic. What it means for this congregation and what it means for the cultures of this church. We are not where we were with the virus. We're not back when we were living in, when we were washing groceries. I think that is the source of not the groceries, but that period is the source of the trauma. I don't think the pandemic itself is the same as the shutdown. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I'm marking the time between when we shut down and when we actually got access to the vaccines as sort of chapter 1, like the scary trauma part of the pandemic. The next chapter of the pandemic was from when the vaccines protected us. That lasted roughly April until Omicron hit, where essentially if you were able to get the vaccine, which not everyone was, you were essentially protected. You can go live your life, and we are still following some of the more community guidelines. The chapter we're in now, the vaccines protect us, but they do not prevent transmission. The masks protect us, but only with proper masking. We know enough about transmission that those who wish can wear well-fitting N95 masks and be very protected. Also, the second, I realized the part I skipped. So first chapter was the shutdown trauma. Second chapter was the vaccines. That was my angry chapter. Was anyone else, like the first one I was just scared and sad and all the other kind of muddle of emotions. But that second chapter, I was mad at people a lot. Anyone else anger? I'm not angry now, and I don't know why. But I'm in sort of, I guess we're in chapter 3. I'm hesitant to make any declaration about the pandemic or where it's going. So what I'm about to say is not intended to be triumphant. It's not an applause line, so please don't hear it as that. It is a sober acknowledgement of where we are. The next chapter of this pandemic, and especially as it relates to this church, is one where we are trying to become at peace, trying to be restored, trying to do whatever reconciliation work we need to do with the trauma that happened in the past. We are no longer living in a world where many of us are at the same risk we were when this thing started. The COVID safety team has met and asked us to wait until this current surge is over, and then the bump that we're expecting from kids being in school and LSU and Southern open and BRCC opening back up. After that surge, we are going to ask you to make, we're going to drop the request that everyone wear masks. I am still going to wear a mask up here. It is your choice what to do. Everyone now has access to the vaccine, including little kids. I would ask us to still default to mask until we can get consent from someone else that they are comfortable with us unmasking. I think we should always be looking for consent anyway, but that is my request of you. So wait until we figure out what's happening with the schools, and then, I don't know, I'm picking Labor Day, but that's just a made-up day, but soon we will stop enforcing the masking. And this is both good and bad. It's just a marker of where we are. And it means we also have to acknowledge this next chapter in our church as it relates to the pandemic. We are slowly and carefully rebuilding, and I know that things are not the way that they were. Life in church slowly grows and adapts. For those of you who really want proof of this, if you want to grab you don't need to now, but the title of the gray hymnal is Singing the Living Tradition, because our tradition moves and changes over time. And this church has always had cultural shifts that were subtle and slow and sometimes a little faster. But because we've had these 2 years of trauma, all of the shifts are in stark contrast to before times and now. So it is true that we've always changed. And I bet if you took any 2 years in the two-year period in the life of this church, it looked significantly different for each of those. But staff and many of our leaders have been asking ourselves over and over, what are the things that we have no control over, and what are the things that we can handle? It's the Serenity Prayer. So for example, attendance. And I wrote this before you all showed up. So for those of you online, there's not the 20 or 40 that's in my script, but I'm going to keep it here because that's what it is. Y'all, there's like more than 70 of you here, which I have seen exactly twice. Once when we introduced you, and once when I was installed since the before time. So this is just phenomenal. But I'm going to keep reading as if, because I wrote it, so I'm going to keep reading as if the reality isn't the reality. So we have to acknowledge the reality that everyone is not ready to come back. We've tried all kinds of asks and strategies, and for now the simple reality is that the church will be 40 to 60 or 80 people in worship, because that's simply where we are in the pandemic. We cannot control the traffic flow in the church, but we can continue to be constantly here, to be inviting you back, and to make church happen with what we have. Remember, before times, we were looking at 200 to 300 sometimes on average on a Sunday, so we're still not there, but this is significantly closer. I'll reference this a little later, but the root structure of the congregation is strong, although many of our branches have been cut back. Not the branches groups, the metaphor. And so we are trying to be strategic about the changes that are happening now. So here's a few examples. I have always wanted to cycle the announcements before the service. When we were doing the live streaming and only the live streaming, we realized that we need a landing place for you when you were logging in. And so we created, Lee does most of the work on those slides, but we created the pre-service. So we actually got to bring into church something that we've been wanting to do for years because the pandemic brought it about. Another example, and this one is more personal to me. We are living with two competing and contradictory realities. The first is that the most effective way, based on everything that I have read, I'm assuming y'all have read, says that the way to grow lifelong Unitarian Universalist, which is what I am called to do, is to have children be a part of worship. So we on the worship staff are absolutely committed to making sure worship is available for all ages. And we know, and I'm going to try and say this so it isn't personal, we know that parents are probably more exhausted than they may have ever been and are needing a break. So we have these two competing realities that we want to grow lifelong Unitarian Universalist and we want to give parents a break. And we know that many adults are longing for worship that is not as often interrupted with the noises of children. We know that these years have been hard and you want to have your church back. All of that is to say there's a change that I'm going to say and there's a thing that's going to stay for right now. As soon as Kathy is able to hire the staff, we are going to reopen the nursery and we're going to provide childcare for ages, is it 5 and under? 6 and under. This is not Sunday school. This is, everything we do is faith formation, but this is not intended to be faith formation. It's just respite. We are already providing a whole slew of tactile tools, both for children and for adults, to use if you have fidgety hands. Also, we're going to keep the doors open, both for airflow, but also because it makes it much easier if someone is needing a break to go out and come back and they don't miss the service. And if we need overflow, you can hear things outside. Also, in the immediate short term, we will continue to have faith formation during middle hour. There's a logistical reason and there's a faith formation reason for the middle hour. The logistical reason is we just don't have enough children and youth showing up to offer it during the services. And also we don't have the volunteers to run it yet, which is true of most everything in the church right now. We are running the church on a much smaller capacity because everyone is in a much more limited capacity in every aspect of their lives. In the spirit of me, way over universalizing something. And even if we put it during a service, we would have to pick which service we would put it at, which would completely, I worry, would undermine the attendance at the other service. So until we have more attendance in worship and we have more children and youth and more volunteers, we can't have the conversation. We can have the conversation, but middle hour is a reality. But also we really want to offer a new model for faith formation. We would like to have everyone to have the opportunity to learn and grow and to worship together. Having faith formation classes for all ages between the services right now logistically is manageable, but it also gives us more flexibility in terms of what we can offer and the potential growth for this church. After I heard some of the substantial pushback from many members of this congregation, I reached out to a number of colleagues about this to ask what they thought of this, to see if I'm just sort of stuck in a thing or if there's some truth in it. One of them said they were very jealous of us having middle hour and that if he could change one thing in his church, it would be to do that. I was in a church that had a middle hour, and it was transformative for the life of that church. So I'm asking us that we continue to try it this way, but with the option of childcare for our youngest and most fidgety Unitarian Universalists. When we have more of a critical mass and more of a volunteer base, we reevaluate everything every 6 months anyway. But for now, I'm asking us to try it here. Also, we did something else during the pandemic. This past year, this congregation rose up in ways that I could have never expected. Many of you have heard that I spent much of my time having COVID calling as many church members as I could, asking if you would be willing to increase your pledge. I think I'm going to say this during the service. I've not said this out loud, but at the start of this year, we were looking at cutting the second minister position because we were in that much financial worry. And the congregation, stepped up so much that we felt very confident going on with the search and committing long-term to bringing in a second minister. And we see no reason why, we as staff and leaders see no reason why that's going to decline anytime soon. But that's because of what you did. Also, that process was probably very exhausting to a lot of you. You deserve to turn in your pledge and to have everyone turn in their pledge and have it be done and us be able to keep going on with the programming in the church. And so what we did is we implemented a generosity team. Right now it is headed up by Donnie Yelverton. And the generosity team has been meeting to find more sustainable ways to be a good stewardship church. And one of the things they did is they reached out to a consultant from the UUA who I was thinking about reaching out, but I didn't tell him that, and then they reached out anyway. So Mark, if you would just wave, I'm going to invite you up in like 2 paragraphs. He is a consultant who was originally from the UUA, and now he works for, is it Stewardship for Us? With 2 U's or 1? One. Just 1 U. Stewardship for Us, and they didn't take full advantage of the pun, which I appreciate, or the wordplay. He is a member of the All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington, D.C. He has been here all weekend talking to as many leaders as he could get his hands on about what the culture of this church is. And he's going to make recommendations for how we can move forward in this, for our next chapter in this church. There was something else cool I was going to say about you, but I've forgotten. So pretend I said it. Mark, thank you for being here.
Thank you. You can start the slides if you like. I want to start by thanking all of you for inviting me back into your spiritual home. I've worked here before. This congregation is really very precious to me, special, and I work with a lot of congregations, so it's meaningful. I want to thank the staff, the clergy, all the volunteers who came yesterday, your board, for inviting me in and being so open and frank with me. It's really helped. I want to start by telling you that this congregation has weathered the pandemic really quite well. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and what some other congregations have experienced. Financially, getting through a pandemic is a really big lift. So it's a real stress test on your finances, and you all have really gotten through it, partially because you manage your finances so well. You were able to flip to a multi-platform capability quite well. This sanctuary, for instance, is really well suited in a way that other sanctuaries aren't, and you've got the equipment and volunteers to help you manage that, so it's really quite amazing. Your leadership is quite strong and held steady, and through the pandemic, that's been great. Your staff has been great, as well as your administrator. but just realize it's been a very serious extra burden for them during this time. They've been carrying a lot of this. Your COVID safety task force did an amazing job. And yesterday, I was meeting all day long with lay leaders. It was a very impressive day to me because every meeting was packed with people. I mean, there were really a lot of people here yesterday meeting with me, many more than I anticipated. Now, I will tell you that some of those folks are doing those volunteer roles. Other people used to do those volunteer roles, and some of the people just came to give their ideas. Next slide, please. Other congregations have really faced a dire situation right at the start. So Reverend Nathan was talking about phases. Some congregations, that first phase, they just had to shut down. There was no way that they could do multi-platform worship. They just basically, you know, there are UU congregations that are 300 years old. It's very hard to put projectors and screens in a 300-year-old historic building. So there are lots of ways in which this congregation didn't suffer those kinds of challenges. Some of those congregations, the staff were not able or willing to step in. So right in the middle of that really critical point, they lost key staff members and sometimes clergy, which is really hard. And financially, some of them were on the edge of their finances that when the pandemic hit, they had to lay off staff. They were really stuck. It was a rough road for them, particularly at that beginning point. Next slide, please. It feels to me like your inflection point is now. It feels to me like this is the moment when things could really change or they could kind of grind along for a while. So if you want the offerings and programs that you used to have that were so rich for you in your life, and if you want to grow as a congregation, and this congregation has put a lot of investments pre-pandemic into growing and prepared yourselves in various ways to do that, now is the time. Really, now is the time for you to engage in that way. Next slide, please. This is the congregation that shows up. That's not just a slogan. You guys really do show up. It's obvious to me, and it's obvious to Baton Rouge. You show up for each other. You show up for the community. Now's the time you really need to show up for your church. It's really important that you focus on that with your time, your treasure, your talent. You may have heard those three, and the fourth one, T. So to volunteer, give of your financial resources generously, give your skills, knowledge, and muscle, and also the people that you know. Invite people here. Connect them to online worship. Invite them to the Facebook page. All of those things that you can do, talk to people when you're out in the community and let them know where you worship and why. That's going to be very important going forward. Next slide, please. If you do show up, and I'm talking about all of you here today as well as the folks online, anyone who can safely engage, you will regain what you used to have before the pandemic and some things that you'd never anticipated before, new things. You'll draw people here, but it won't happen unless you do. Thank you very much.
So, can we thank the trio? We lost one of them by design because this is a duet piece, but can we thank the trio again for their music? Every week we share, oh, this is kind of cool. I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to do it. Did I say how much we shared last week? Do you remember? All right. When we were shut down, we were looking at getting about $250 a month that we would share with other organizations. There was one month we got $31. We don't have July's in yet because some of the checks come in a little late. June, we shared with Diversity House, we shared $1,200. And every month it has been, give or take a few $100s, very similar. So I'm very excited to see how Planned Parenthood comes in for July. This is not July's shared offering. It is August's. We're trying to make sure you are paying attention and on your toes. Humanities Amped is a great organization that does really good work in the community. And this church is a good church that does great work in the community. So we're going to split it halfway down the middle. I'll ask you, those of you online, go through the unitarian.org/give, br.org. And for those of you in person, put whatever you want in the bursars. I'll now ask you to give very generously as this morning's offering is given and received.
Thank you so much for that. Y'all bring me to tears, you know that, right? So often all of y'all do. So I am who I am because of who I was and what I did as a child. Not entirely, of course. There's been lots of changes and choices and healthy and not so healthy responses to what one therapist euphemistically called growth opportunities. But so many of the decisions that my parents made for me as a child shaped who I am as an adult. One of the decisions that they made was to bring me to Sunday school and then to church every week. It was just as much a habit as brushing my teeth or doing my homework. How many of y'all have the habit of brushing your teeth? How many of y'all have the habit of doing your homework or your work? Yeah. Every single time as an adult I go to the dentist, or I sign up for a class, or I walk into a worship service, I am grateful to my parents for the foundation that they laid for me in being successful in those things. So faith formation is who we are and how we grow as spiritual beings. For children, the foundations that are set for them by the adults in their families. For adults, it is a constant evolution. And so our next chapter of family ministries, which is ministry to the families of all ages and sizes and configurations, whether there are children in the home or not. The next chapter is guided by our annual vision of ministry and shaped by our church mission: love, connect, and transform, which I think is a perfect encapsulation of the idea of faith formation. So note about language. You may notice a slight difference. I tend to talk more about faith formation and about faith development than I do about RE. RE is sort of insider language, and it implies school, where people are like cups, where you fill them up with knowledge and then they're done. But people are not empty cups. People come to us with innate wisdom, with curiosity, with thoughts and reasonings of their own. And what we want to do is help people of all ages develop their faith, their values, their connections, and their knowledge of themselves as Unitarian Universalists. So back to the next chapter of family ministries at this church. I'm looking at a four-pronged approach: worship, middle hour, not Sunday morning, and home ministry. Really 5, because this church also has a long history of events and parties, and those are faith development too. So on worship, on Sunday mornings, as Reverend Nathan said, we are prioritizing worship for all ages. Worship is one of the biggest things we do. If we want people of all ages to be part of the community, we need to include them. And make no mistake, children are listening even when we think they aren't. Too often, we UUs have raised our children separate from the adult worship world, and when they come into our services as adults, they feel uncomfortable and ill at ease, and it's no surprise because they haven't been here. We want people of all ages to learn the rhythm and the ritual of our worship, so when they go to other places and other churches, it feels like home. We want people of all ages to internalize UU words and UU music, so they're there inside our hearts and our minds when we need them. Also, church is one of the only multi-generational spaces in modern U.S. society where children interact with adults that are not their parents, and adults interact with adults that are not their children. What an opportunity that is for us to learn from and to support each other. We know parenting is hard, and we know that helping children learn how to be in worship is hard work, and we honor the parents and the congregants that are doing that work. We also know parents need a break because they are doing really hard work in so many ways right now, which is why we are working to reopen nursery care and offering child care for children up to age 6. Children are always welcome in worship, and sometimes parents need a break. We hear you on both of those things, and that's why we will be working to restore children's child care and nursery care in September. Middle hour is faith formation for all ages. Someone said yesterday that adults don't need faith formation, and I think that all of us are learning and still growing. And so to meet that need, we have 3 great offerings for adults during the middle hour. We'll have a Sunday speaker series where people will come in, community organizers will come in, talk about what they do, and have a Q&A. We will have a spiritual practices class, and we will have our ongoing faith and exploration, which is classes for people who are new to the church or new to the faith. Children will have choices between Chalice Children for the younger children, Superhero Academy for the older children, and our Sunday morning youth group for teens. Sunday is so full of opportunities, but wait, there's more. Because on not-so-Sunday mornings, we have branches. We have our anti-oppression study group starting up online again. We're looking for interest if y'all are interested in joining an online spiritual class called Wellspring. I'm looking to see if people are interested in doing a book study group on the UU Common Read. For children and youth, we will be doing OWL. This is an Our Whole Lives year, and we're looking at when and how to add that back in. And we're adding social things, like we have a family dinner coming up on this Friday, and a youth social coming up on September the 3rd, Saturday. If any of these things are something you're interested in, or if I missed something, I will be right out there. Please come tell me. And also, please come tell me how you'd like to help with those things. Family home ministry. In 15 years of doing this work, I and most of my colleagues have tried really hard to figure out how to get Unitarian Universalism into the home. The pandemic, for all hard and impossible and frustrating it was, gave us an opportunity to start to do that in a way that's actually working. We have 2 strong programs for getting things into the home. We send postcards every week, and we do deliveries seasonally every 4 to 8 weeks. with activities that families can do together. And I wonder sometimes if adults would like those things to come home too. If you would, please, I'll be at the table, come see me. There is so much going on. I am excited to share it with you, and I am excited to work with you in staffing and building up these programs. I think we share a dream of every person in our church community being able to connect with the ministries that will help them live fully into the vision of our church, loving, connecting, and transforming.
So we're going to sing this next hymn, but we're going to do it a cappella. Lee, who should we have? Lee and me. All right. So we're going to ask Kathy to multitask on this one. I invite you to rise and body your spirit for this one.
So we do it through once and then they repeat with me? So if you know it, join in the first time. If you're picking it up, join in the second. We rise, humbly hearted rise, won't be divided, rise, with spirits to guide us, rise. Do it with me. We rise, humbly hearted rise, won't be divided, rise, with spirits who guide us, rise. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. We rise, all of the children rise, elders with wisdom rise, ancestors surround us, rise. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. We rise, up from the wreckage, rise, with tears and with courage, rise, fighting for life we rise. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. In hope, in prayer, we find ourselves here. In hope, in prayer, we're right here. We rise, humbly hearted rise, we won't be divided, rise, with spirits to guide us, rise. And so, we come to the blessing of the backpacks. So as we come into our backpack blessing ritual, I am going to invite you to get your backpack and hold it in your lap or your hands or your thought. And of course, by backpack, I mean your backpack or your gym bag or your dance bag or your lunchbox or diaper bag, briefcase, purse, knitting bag, cell phone, or keychain with its keys to transportation and shelter. Because this ritual is not just for people who carry backpacks, but it is for each and every one of us.
Every week this summer, the children in our Sunday morning friendship camp have read words by Unitarian Universalist religious educator Layla Ibrahim. It is a blessing you were born.
The tags are not the blessing. They are the reminder from your church community that you are whole, you are holy, you are a blessing to the world.
It matters what you do with your life.
Every one of us in this room, every one of us online, every one of us in this community, what we do changes the world every day in little ways and in big ways.
What each of us knows about God is a piece of the truth.
Everybody knows something. Nobody knows everything. Whatever you hold sacred, it is only a part of the larger spirit that connects us all. That reaches from our feet here on the ground all the way to the stardust out in the space. That calls us to love and to take care of each other.
We do not have to do it alone.
None of it. We don't have to create love or justice or joy all by ourselves.
So as we get ready to leave this place today, with these things that carry the everydayness of our lives in them, we might think that we are going out there on our own, to school or to work or to wherever we are heading. We are not. One of the blessings of being part of a church community is that we are reminded again and again that we are not alone. And there is joy in that reminder.
We are reminded that we are connected to so many people, that in fact we are surrounded by love, and there is joy in that reminder.
We are reminded that when we make our decisions about how we act, how we do what we do for the love of all people, and that the love of all people includes every one of us. And there is joy, great joy in that reminder.
When you hold this little tag in your hand, may you remember all these things, and may that memory bring you joy and peace. So may it be. So as we are ready to do this ritual, please line up on the east side and the west side and come forward to receive your blessing.
few years ago, I'm going to mix my metaphors, so please forgive me for this closing part. A few years ago, a freeze killed off 2 of my satsuma trees. I have 3. I really like satsumas. One completely died, it's gone, I had to plant a new one. But the other I trimmed right above the graft. I thought it was lost hope that this tree would never grow back. It was missing everything that I thought that it needed to survive. And that first year it grew some branches, but it was still pretty much just a weird looking bush. And I know for those of you who've ever tried to grow your own satsuma trees from the seeds, it doesn't work. They grow these spiny devil plants. So I was fully expecting just the end of that tree. The second year, those branches started growing stronger and stronger. First of all, the first tree is fine. It's doing whatever it wants to do. That's not where this metaphor is. It's this middle tree. The second year, it looked like a small satsuma tree again, but with almost no fruit. Well, actually, no fruit at all. This year, it is back. No fruit, but it is back. If you didn't know its history, you had no idea what had happened to it. And that's where I see we are as a church, or I'm hoping where you are as a person, as it relates to your own recovery. We have been through some of the toughest years you could ever throw at a congregation, and I bet some of you have been through some of the toughest years that have ever been thrown at you. But because the roots were strong and well maintained, because for generations this church and this faith have been nourished by our ancestors, this is about you individually also, by the way, your roots and your ancestors. And a solid theology that prioritizes love and justice over tradition and orthodoxy. Is it currently producing the same goodness it did before the freeze? No. The tree produces much, much less. Do we still have the same numbers and programs that we did before the shutdown? No, of course not. No one does. Actually, that's not true. There's one group of white Protestants that are doing well, and those are the most openly defiant. The ones who defied the pandemic from the very start are booming. Every other faith denomination is struggling. So that's just a reality of it. But we have great roots in this church. Every year, when it's pruning time, I hesitate. Last year, I hesitated so profoundly that the day I walked up to my fig tree to prune it, finally, when I got the courage, the leaves had already started growing back, and so I couldn't do it. I delay every year because I don't logically understand how it could grow back. And I might lack the faith in the root system to trust that it will grow back. But every year that I face it and I wind up, every year that I face it and I do cut the tree, I wind up with a healthy tree, usually with fruit. This church has great roots that have been cut. You have great roots that have been cut over and over and over. You have given us, through your generosity and your commitment and your love for this church and this faith, the ability to write a next chapter. Who has given you the ability to write your next chapter in your life? So for the sake of mixing my metaphors way too much, today we are beginning something new and exciting. The roots are there, the energy is there, the growth is there. So what do we need in the next chapter? We don't bless these backpacks because we think something special is going to happen through the blessing. That you'll get better grades or a promotion or be more comfortable at the gym or whatever. We bless them because we want you to know as you go out into the world this week, we want you to know that this church is here for you. That whatever you are writing, that we are here to support you. We want you to know that you are worthy of love and that many of the people you are around need to hear and need to know that they are worthy of love and of justice. Amen. Let's sing. I invite you to rise and body your spirit.
Sailing all my life.
out this week, know that you are loved. Know that someone else needs to know that they are loved. Go make the world that you deserved before you were born. Go in peace. Go in love. Amen.